Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hi, good evening, viewers. You're joining me, Louise Marie, here with Joanne Crofts. We are got an exciting show for you lined up this evening. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, everyone. How are you, Louise?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. We have got a wonderful show set this evening. We are going to be talking about decoding and conquering, looking particularly at exam questions across numerous subjects, trying to boost student outcomes. We all know that we currently have a lot of frustrations I do in my classroom when I've got very able students and thinking about why they might potentially not be achieving their potential in outcomes in exam questions. So we've got a resident specialist with us, Joanne, who has done many research eds presenting on this topic. So we're very lucky to have you, Joanne, with us. So yeah, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Joanne, tell us a little bit about your role and what it is that you currently do.
Yeah, so my name is Joanne. I am a science teacher background. I have taught a bit of psychology as well, so go into the social science and share that with you, Louise.
Hey!
I know, absolutely. I love teaching psychology. Unfortunately, for me, but very fortunate for my school, we've got an amazing psychology teacher there, and she teaches obviously psychology and geography, but we had some GCSE psychology that I got to teach it previously, and it was amazing. But I am an associate assistant principal for teaching and learning. It was really interesting, obviously, watching the video just before this started. Like, I think if you cut me open, I would bleed at teaching and learning. I absolutely love talking about like the practice, and, you know, we all have those stories, those horror stories of, you know, when we think something's going to go really well in lesson and it just is a complete car crash, and like unpicking those and also almost laughing at each other, like, oh, why did we think that was going to happen? But also magpieing. I absolutely love magpieing ideas. Do that on LinkedIn and X all of the time. And I was actually just reminiscing, like, one of the first things I did before I started doing my research eds and Teach Talk was actually one of these Teach Talk radio science ones, and it was like an online audio one. And I don't know, I just think it's amazing actually that this platform exists, and, you know, us that do really geek out about these things, and I don't think it's a bad thing that we geek out about these things, get to share that practice, because sometimes, you know, not everyone in school in the day has the time to talk about it, and, you know, not everyone has got the same experience. So I think it's really great actually that we can branch out and speak to people in different schools and different settings.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to have you on. I've been trying to get you on the show for a little while, but I know you've got a really busy schedule because you present a lot. And like I say, you're currently working full time in a school as associate SLT. So we're very, very grateful to have you on.
Well, do you know, I'm really happy to be here as well. And like I say, if I end up geeking out too much and, you know, talking too much, please just help me. But okay, we get that point now, Joanne. Move on.
Oh no, I'm excited to geek out with you. Like, I'm all here for it. So, okay, right, if you're ready, we'll launch straight in. We've got a whole lineup of questions that obviously I know you've got a lot of academic research that you've done yourself and you kind of wanted to share with us. So, yeah, if you're ready, let's go. So the first one I wanted to ask you about is, I think, one of the main things when we're thinking about like decoding exam questions is thinking, you know, we've got students with different cognitive abilities coming in with different levels of knowledge as well as different abilities in terms of skill. Can you tell us how you, or a particular strategy, more specific, a specific strategy that you use when you're trying to introduce particularly tricky command questions, command words?
Yeah, I think the thing with command words are there's so many of them, they're so broad. And the one that I go to and I always teach first, because I think it's the easiest one for students to understand. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the trickiest, but it's the basic. So in science, we have foundation tier and higher tier. And I know some subjects do have that, some subjects don't. But either way, you have your AO1, AO2, AO3 skills. So the more AO1 skill command words normally are the difference between describe and explain. And I don't know about you, but the amount of times you have asked a student an explain question and they just describe it to you, and it's like a 3 or 4 mark explain question. In HUMS, it might be obviously a 9 or a 12 marker. And they've done a great job describing it, but they haven't explained it. And you're there writing all over the work, why, like, expand this point. So for me, what we do is we show them a cartoon picture of a cat. And it is quite comical, and they're like, why is this cat on the screen? And it's not just any cat, it's a fat cat. So you can imagine teenagers, they see a fat cat on the screen, they are laughing, they're like, okay, where is Miss going with this one? What is she doing? And we ask the students to describe the fat cat on the mini whiteboard, talking to the person next to them, get some more involved. Tell me what that fat cat looks like. And then once they've done that, we're like, okay, explain why that's the case. So we talk about the colour of its fur and genetics, you know, the fact that it might have overeaten, it might not be exercising, it might be a bit lazy, it's got blue eyes, you know, it's a cat, so therefore it has 4 paws. And I think that one is a really easy level to go in at, that we start even with the year 7s, they can do it, everyone can access that. So it's not leaving anything ambiguous. You know, when we start with these command words, we don't want to go into a really high, justify one straight away. Start off with the basics. Do they know the difference between describe and explain? Because if they can't do that, there's no point in trying to tell them how to evaluate a question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, do you know what, that's really interesting, because I had this the other day in one of my GCSE psych classes, and I also taught GCSE history for a number of years previously at different schools. And to be honest, I've never really thought about the difference between describe and explain. I think I've just kind of automatically, subconsciously thought describe is like tell a story. You know, if we asked to describe a historical event, or in psychology, you're asked to describe a theory like social learning theory, like run it through. For us, that would be just say the key terms. But I actually did have a student say to me the other day, Miss, what's the difference between describe and explain? And I think I just kind of bumbled through it, to be honest. And what you've just suggested seems like a really good strategy. Like you say, you can do in any subject at any level, and it doesn't matter your ability or kind of your previous knowledge or content. You can literally just do that to get students thinking about the structure of the skill as opposed to the content itself.
Exactly. And I think it's separating those two, you know, and we talk about cognitive overload, you know, what's the cognitive load of the question. If you're thinking, do you want the students to be concentrating on what the disciplinary scale of the question is, or what is the question asking? And actually, you want them to be able to decode what the question is asking in terms of like what type of response, so then they can use the cognitive, you know, space, their working memory, to focus on actually what is the knowledge that they need to access to be able to answer that question. And science is a good one. Obviously, I apologise in advance. A lot of the examples I'm going to give are science, but that's just because, you know, that's what I know best. But a really common one is to describe the adaptations of the small intestines. So if it was a 3 mark, students would have to say they've got a large surface area because of the villi, microvilli, 1 cell thick, and it's got a good blood supply. They would just have to list those 3. And then sometimes it's asking them to explain them. So you would then have to say the 1 cell thick, so there is a short diffusion pathway. And it's adding that last little bit of detail on to explain why it is. And it's getting students to remember what explain means. And like I say, it's making sure that they know what the question means, because a lot of the time, and for me, the biggest frustration, and this all stemmed from students leaving answers blank in tests. And I'll be honest, I mark in my spare time. I don't think I'm allowed to say the example. I'm going to get told off by him. But I mark in my spare time, and I think it's really great CPD to do that. And I'm not going to lie, when I'm getting paid to mark them and they leave them blank, I'm like, yes, like, you know, don't have to do that one. Amazing. When it's your own class, and you know, ultimately we are getting judged on the data of our classes, singular or as a cohort, I'm like, why have I left it blank? And it's even more frustrating when then you ask them that question verbally and they tell you straight away. I'm like, this is where it all stems from. I'm like, why is that happening? And it was 3 academic years ago now, about 2.5 years ago, that I started to look at this. And what I did, science has 6 exams. So they have biology, chemistry and physics paper 1 and 2s. And what I did was I looked at my class average when every student attempted every question, and I looked at the class average when every student didn't attempt every question, and then the class average as a whole. And the difference between the students that attempted every question and the students that didn't attempt every question was 3 grades. Like genuinely 3 grades difference. Like that's humongous. If we could all be making 3 grade progress with our classes, each student, like that's revolutionary, isn't it? Like that is amazing. So then I realized that, okay, well, there is this massive issue. The issue is definitely affecting their outcomes. Why? And I started speaking to the students, and like I say, they could tell me verbally, but they couldn't write it down. And actually it was like, oh, I didn't know what the question was asking, or I didn't know that's what the question meant. And then that's where I really started looking into this, and we started looking at like I say, we started slow with the fat cat, and we have exam briefings at our school. I imagine you have exam briefings in most schools. It's really common. One of the first pictures we'll have is remember the fat cat. If it's described, you give a statement. If it's explained, give reasons why. And then from that, we come up with loads of little strategies, which, we'll talk about later on in the show. I'm just really conscious that, I've spoke a lot and we're only on question 1. I do apologise.
It ties in really well into question 2, because you've touched upon cognitive load theory, and we know that's been obviously going since like the late 80s, as well as cognitive load theory. But I think obviously it's come to the forefront of education in the last couple of decades or so. Now it's great because we're now actually having these conversations. So we've talked about cognitive load theory. That does suggest that actually misinterpretation will still persist even after you've given direct instruction. So how would you go about addressing that challenge in the classroom?
So I think it's really important that with cognitive load theory, students can remember about 7 things plus or minus 2, and actually it goes back to the point I was saying earlier. We want them to focus on the disciplinary knowledge, not the decoding the question. So like I say, we strip everything back to begin with, and it's the command words. And it's really funny, like I gave you the example of the fat cat, but I tell you one that they absolutely love, and you've got to have a thick skin as a teacher to do this, I tell you now. But when you come on to evaluate, ask them to evaluate your lesson, or they will learn evaluate super quickly if you ask them to evaluate your lesson. So in science, I've done this with my year 10s. Honestly, never got them to understand something so quick in their life. So they had to evaluate my lesson. That's tell me what was good about my lesson, and what they think could be refined about my lesson, what they would improve if they were me. And then overall, they had to give an overall judgment. And I'll tell you something, honestly, they've absolutely loved that. And ever since, they know what to do with evaluate question. But it's when you're teaching the command words, try not to have it subject specific, try to have it to something that they can all access. Because again, you're reducing that cognitive load. And with command words, we don't just show them the fat cat in September, hope they remember by they get to a year 11, and it's the same with evaluate. We really make sure that we are breaking it down really slowly, and we are then giving them a strategy to do it. So it's great if they know what evaluate means, but how do they tackle an evaluate question? How do they tackle a compare question? How do they tackle a plan question? Because something that is, very specific to science is they sometimes have to plan a method, which they wouldn't necessarily be doing in their history of the maths. So we've got something called an if-then sheet, which I absolutely I'm so proud of. And it's, I haven't got children, but I feel like if I had a child, I would feel the way I do about this if-then sheet, only because it's been downloaded like 200 plus times off my blog. And I'm like, if 200 people ask me for a resource in real life, I would be like, I think I'd be overwhelmed. I'd be like, oh, go away, there's too many people. Honestly, I'm so proud of it. And people I've seen on X, they've took it and they've adapted it. So an if-then sheet to help reduce the cognitive load basically has the main command words. Now, there are plenty of command words, and we'll get on to why command words as a whole is such a big issue. We have the main command words. So for science, it's describe, explain, plan, compare, justify. And it tells you what AQA, which is the example that we use, say these command words mean, and then the strategy to come with that. So if it is an evaluate question, our strategy is for them to draw a table and to list what's good, the strengths, list the weaknesses, and then overall give a judgment. If it's a compare, we also tell them the strategies to draw a table. They need to say how they're similar, how they're different. we also sometimes have a describe a graph question in science. So the strategy on the if then sheets, if it's describe a graph, split the graph into 3 parts, label it A, B, and C, explain what's happening specifically in A, specifically in B, and specifically in C. And again, it's so when they have that question come up, and we use them, train them to use the if then sheets independently. So when those type of questions come up, they're not sat there like, oh, what does this question mean? They can look at the if then sheet and then use that to decode what the question is asking, and then that frees up that cognitive load to then actually look at what is the disciplinary skill of that question. Not stressed about what does evaluate mean. They can then go on to writing the strengths down, writing the weaknesses down. And again, I feel like I've spoken loads there, but honestly, I'm so passionate about this because it's been a game changer, that sheet has.
I was going to say, I have seen this sheet, obviously, because I've seen you present it, and it's wonderful. Can colleagues reach out to you to get a copy of this resource?
Yeah, definitely. So it is on my blog. It's shameless, plug. teachingsparks.wordpress. But also it's on, if you message me on LinkedIn or X, which is Miss Crofts, I'm more than happy to share them. Genuinely, I've seen them again. Like I feel like I'm sort of maybe bigging myself up too much, but I saw people make psychology versions, geography versions. It was someone made a science one. I was like, excuse me, I made the science one. No, I'm only joking. But they were using them all. And honestly, I think I don't want to say viral, because 200 are definitely not viral in the TikTok era, what the kids would say. But genuinely, when I think if 200 people asked me for something in real life, I'd be over the moon. So it's something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and thank you for sharing that, because I think one of the reasons that I wanted to kind of get you on the show was to get practical strategies, and I know you've got a lot of resources out there and you're excellent at sharing them, so that's really generous.
Yeah, and
pick yourself up. I mean, you've worked hard for it. Let's go.
Well, do you know what it was? I'll be honest, it was when I did Research Ed National and presented on this, and I walked into the room because I had the graveyard shift just after lunch, and I walked in and there was people sat on the tables at the back because there wasn't enough chairs, and I was like, I was like, are they here to see me? Are they here, to hear about command words and how to decode them? But like I say, we go back to +3 progress. If we can, even if we were making half of that, a grade and a half progress for each of our students, the life chances that that's going to improve, and the students, what they're going to be able to access with those GCSE grades, if that's not motivation to do this, I don't know what is.
No, I think that's great. Thank you for that. Okay, so now is probably a good time to just plug our generous sponsors. So this show is brought to you live in partnership with #Learning, publishers of PD books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So I imagine many of our viewers and listeners who are live and also playing back already get a lot of these resources, but if you go into our website, we do often have discount codes out there for you, so you can get the next best thing, of which there are many great resources out there at the moment. So they seem to be flooding my LinkedIn, which is great. Okay, lovely. Joanne, so we've talked about how you introduce command words at a really basic level across subjects, and we've talked about how you can bridge the gap between misconceptions. I kind of want to say, because I know you're very keen on the theory, which is great, and I know a lot of our viewers are too. So if we take this back to Vygotsky, I think we're looking late 70s, 77, 78, I think, if I remember from my PGCE. Gosh, I'm really going back there. I'm really having to think about dates at this point. Emphasize the zone of proximal development and the role of scaffolding. And I know this is a hot topic again at the moment, and there are some great resources out there. How would you tailor command word instruction across either different topics inside a subject or across different subjects in different departments?
So I think with the command words, we've got to think about the purpose, and like we keep saying, to reduce that cognitive load in the assessment, so that it frees up that working memory. So the best way to do that is to start early. So make sure that there's no reason why we should be starting this in year 10. It's not something that we need to do for the GCSEs. It's actually scaffolding that we are doing for them. So actually, by the time they get to year 11, we should have already removed that. They should already be able to work it out and decode it without us being there. So I think for me, you have to start early. you have to start in year 7, and then it depends on the class and the students and the actual question. So for some of them, if they are getting it and that, you know, they understand it, you might have it as a retrieval question. So what does the command word explain mean? Or which command word would ask you to list the strengths and the weaknesses? And I think that for a more able class, the ones that are getting it, would be great. Some classes, they need more help than that. You know, you might be, every time you have a lesson, you might have to be cold calling, you know, when you go through your lesson outcome. Right, the lesson outcome for today is to, you know, we had explain how the nervous system allows us to adapt to our surroundings. So some of them you might be like, okay, what does explain mean? What on your mini whiteboards, what's that? So you can check quickly if they've got it. And if they have got it, I think then you don't want to labour that point. I think sometimes we almost over scaffold now. I think we've done so well at scaffolding as a profession recently. We understand the importance. We want to make sure that we are reducing that. It's something that we have got to be really careful for. And as a science teacher, and if there's any maths teachers out here, they know what I'm going to say as a science teacher. We butt heads against all the time is lines of best fit. So I don't know if you know this, Louise, but in science, your line of best fit.
Oh, okay. We have it in psychology, and I've actually just had an assessment in research methods where students are trying to draw lines of best fit with line graphs and scattergrams, and I'm like, no, they're a bit different though.
Yeah. Do you know? And I'll be honest, like the difference between a line graph and a scatter graph, like it took me so long to work out that because it's such like a minor difference. Whereas they do like scatter graphs in science, but it's a line graph in maths. But in maths, their lines of best fit has to be straight. It has to be, cannot be curved. In science, it can be curved or straight. So every science teacher, they're marking the lines of best fit, and you could have told them every day since, you know, day dot in year 7 that it could be curved, and you'll still have some straight, even when the data is quite clearly a curve. And I think this is where you've got to be really careful with your command words. And it would be great if, you know, one command word for science meant the same in English and the same in maths and history and engineering and, you know, performing arts, but it doesn't. And I think this is where you need to explicitly teach the command words in your subject. It's not something you can pass the book on, and you can't be like, oh, that's fine, they'll learn that in English, or oh, that's fine, they will learn how to plan a method in hospitality, you know, when they're putting a recipe together. You can't assume that they are learning these skills in other subjects. So you have to make sure that you are planning it for what topics you're about to teach. And there's no point in, you know, going through what an evaluate question means when you're looking at the difference between ionic and covalent bonding, because if that topic lends itself to comparing, that's what you need to be teaching. It's almost, you use them as your hinge questions almost, rather than retrieval at this point, I would say.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting you're talking about kind of introducing them early, because obviously with option subjects, like I'm obviously a head of social sciences, I don't get those students. You know, in some schools I'll get them in year 9 if we do a 3-year GCSE. In my current school, we're starting in year 10. So I am actually having to rely on the fact that they have been taught, you know, well in science, and they are, because our science department is excellent. I mean, it is. But, you know, there is kind of that cross-departmental, I don't know, burden, I think. And so when you have got option subjects and things like hospitality as well, we're kind of expecting that when we're inheriting these students in year 10, you know, pray God that they've been taught some exam technique somewhere, or that they understand what some of these words mean. But I mean, as it stands, I still inherit students, no matter what school I'm in, coming in, that, what does evaluate mean? And I loved your suggestion of getting them to evaluate your lesson, because I think actually mine will be exactly the same, and they'll be like, right, miss, well, we like this and we did not like this, and there was this, and like, what the hell was that? And I just teach it box standard along the lines of, oh, you know, pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, I think it's interesting thinking about how departments need to work together. And if we're talking about things like curriculum sequencing or assessment sequencing across departments, that may be, I mean, tell me your thoughts on this, maybe need something schools should be considering.
Thoughts, this is where I'm going to have to, and I feel naughty for saying this, but agree to disagree with you on this point completely.
Yeah, go for it.
The reason being, command words are too complex. They have completely different meanings. And I have made a note of this just because I'll forget it myself. But evaluate in science, and the same is in psychology. Psychology, is a social science, although I would say it's more of a pure. So honestly, I don't think psychology is a social science, but we'll get into that debate another time. But evaluate in science means strengths, weaknesses, give an overall judgment, which is the same in psychology. In English, though, it means to explain your reaction to the text. So if you evaluate in English, you are explaining your reaction to that test. So you're not giving any strengths or weaknesses. You're literally saying how that text made you feel. And this is the interesting one. In maths, do you want to have a go? What do you think evaluate means in maths? I'll put you on the spot there.
I don't know. Oh my God. Jeez. I mean, I do a bit of maths at A level, but I don't know. Is it like thinking about a method or a process and then thinking about...
Yeah, to be fair, you put it on. So evaluate only higher tier. So it's only higher tier. Identify errors in a method or justify why it's correct. But can you see how those evaluate means? Yeah, well done. Can you see though, as a student, how we need to be teaching what the command words means in our subject, because they are three completely different things. And I think if you put me in front of a maths question and like it said evaluate, I'll be like, what? Like they wrote the wrong word there. You can't evaluate that method. Like,
I mean, ask me. I know what I'm doing.
You can do the maths one. And it does. It means it's completely different things. And again, I think this was the sort of thing that started to ring alarm bells in me. I was assuming that they would come to me in year 10 and 11 and that they would know the difference between describe, explain, compare and evaluate, and to plan a method. And it's crazy actually. And I did some. So the average student, if they did 9 options, although I think most do 8, but I don't know what I was doing at the time. I looked at 9. Maybe it's because our class science is a double, who knows. They would have to learn 288 command words between those 9 subjects. Like it gets ridiculous. So just for context, like maths have 44 command words. Like how are the students going to remember those? Now, I'll be honest, some of them are like give and why and what, and they class them as separate ones, but still 44. Science, we have 28. And when they all have different meanings, and don't get me wrong, some of them cross over. So like with us in psychology, it crosses over. Science crosses over quite a lot with geography. But we can't therefore think, and I know, like, it's really hard when you do only get the students in year 10, and the psychology curriculum is so dense, isn't it? You need to get through it all. But if we are there assuming that they know what evaluate means and compare, we're doing them a disservice, because it's so frustrating. Like I said, going back to my earlier point, they know the answer. You ask them in person and they can tell you. Oh, but I didn't know that's what the question meant. So I feel like I've sort of disagreed with you, and I've sort of gave the reasons why I do, and I do think I stand by it, but it's such a big issue, and I'm fingers crossed that with the new curriculum and assessment reform that they look into this, because for me personally, I think we need to streamline it. I think it's just too much ambiguity. I can't even say the word, but there's too much, the students who are coming with a higher reading age, are going to do better than the students with a lower ability rate. Put my teeth back in. Students who are better readers are going to come out than students that are more emerging readers, should we say, not based on the content, not based on what they know, but based on whether they can decode the question. So someone might have better scientific knowledge, but not get the marks that reflect that because they didn't know what evaluate meant in science, because it means something different in maths and English. And for me, that's morally wrong.
It's so frustrating. The students must feel that. They'll be like, how am I getting this right in one subject and how am I not getting in another.
Especially
And
when
then
you
you're
think
so
of our
right that it
SEND
will probably
students, like, you know, like, I really feel them injustice. And I think if we were to reform them, we personally, you know, we'll go to AQA and Pearson's and the like. And we do. They need to be streamlined. They need to mean the same in each one, because also if we think about the students with slower cognitive processing as well, how much of their time is thinking, right, it's, you know, a describe question in English and that means this, but, you know, actually no, my English exam was this morning, actually I'm in a history exam now. Because don't forget, the exams sometimes on the same day, aren't they?
Yeah.
And, you know, not only are they revising the content, they need to know actually what does that mean for our subject. And, you know, I just think it's really, really hard. And I think if they were streamlined, you know, it would strengthen that cross-curricular consistency, which is what you wanted. And it would help, and it would actually mean that we are teaching our content then rather than teaching how to pass the test. And I know some people hate this idea about being exam factories or teach to the test. And in principle, I agree with that. I don't think we should be exam factories. I don't think we should teach to the test. But ultimately, what is going to improve the students in front of me, their life chances are getting the best possible GCSE grade. So, you know, sometimes that does mean that, unfortunately, I make sure that they know everything that is on the specification and not anything more in that moment in time when they're in year 11, and really push the time, even though something's really interesting for them, because I want them to get the best possible grade to improve their life chances. And I know some people will completely disagree with me with that. I know some people might agree with me, and I think that's probably a bit of a spicy take on exam factories and whether we should be.
I love how we've sugared it up a bit. We're like, it's spicy.
Yeah, I was gonna say it makes it sound like I'm a bit more interesting than I am. I'm like, I call myself spicy, no one else.
I'm here. You know me. I'm here for the controversy. I'm here for the debate. I'm here for the hard questions. Actually, I kind of wanted to come back to something you touched upon earlier, scaffolding. And my naive brain here is thinking, how would you, and we mentioned over scaffolding and the fact that we're kind of not removing those scaffolds soon enough. How would you go about doing that? Because you've mentioned this amazing resource sheet that you've created and that colleagues have, you know, amended it for their subjects. How do you then go about removing? Is it literally just whipping away the sheet? Is it just about doing it to time? Is there a way that you actually structurally remove those scaffolds step by step so that students still feel supported? And it's not like wham, bam, see you later. You had a sheet and now you don't.
No, it's gone. Yeah, no, it's so difficult with scaffolding. And you know, I had this amazing idea this year. We've got a really good head of department for science, Mr. Windows. He's going to love that I gave him a shout out.
Oh, I was going to say, shout out, Mr. Windows.
Shout out, Mr. Windows. Yeah, he's amazing. And I remember sitting down with him saying, oh, I want to map out our curriculum for scaffolding. I want to say what scaffolding we give them in year 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11 and 12 and 13. So it's consistent. So all of the students get the same diet, because I hate the idea of, you know, postcode lottery with teachers. You know, I think that's, you know, what just doesn't matter what teacher you've got in front of you, all kids should be able to get the exact same knowledge, the exact same skills. And I was like, but we need to make sure that we are reducing it, because, you know, scaffolds are meant to be temporary, you know, the clue's in the name of scaffold. Yeah. But then I was like, but the issue with that is your classes are unique, and what scaffolding might be for, we have X and Y's at our school, but what 7X1 might need might be completely different to 7Y1, and you've got to take that into account. So I think I was very naive in thinking I could make this curriculum, and I think you could have one in theory, but the issue is ultimately, if you are removing that scaffold and you're there thinking, right, okay, so the command word today is evaluate. I'm going to ask them to oh my days. I'm going to ask them how to evaluate the question. Sorry, I just saw that it was 100 words.
No, technically 14. Just on LinkedIn, it's 114. I haven't currently got the statistics.
LinkedIn. Oh my god, that's so great.
Yeah, sorry, I've thrown you there. Carry on.
No, you have. I completely lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Oh yeah, so
we're
removing the scaffold.
Yeah.
So if the question was evaluate, and I was there, and what we have are lesson outcomes, year 10 and year 11. Love this. I don't even have to ask them to do it anymore because we're in November now, they're in that routine. They have to bug every lesson outcome. So they have to box the command word, but they have to annotate the command word. So they have to tell me what it means and the strategy that we use in science. So for evaluate, they would say strengths and weaknesses, and then an overall judgment, and then the strategy would be for a table. So the scaffold then actually is by the time they get to 10 and 11, they don't need that sheet because they should be able to do it themselves. But that sheet is available for them to pull out should they need it. Because let's face it, you know, we teach in real classrooms, and you might have had a student who unfortunately has broken their leg and has been off for 3 months. You know, they might need that scaffold. You might have a student who, you know, might be having a really difficult time, you know, like with family life, and actually their mind isn't quite in it at the minute. So actually, although they know, you know, they might just need that little hint and reminder. So the scaffolding should be there, but they shouldn't be reliant all the time. So at the start of my lesson, I don't say, get your if then sheets out, you know, tell me what describe means. That they are there if they need it for support, and they gradually remove them. So I will never say you can't have your if then sheet, but when they're doing their exams and they do their mocks, obviously it's not there for them. So it's about being really kind with that scaffolding, and it's, you know, it's about that equity. So it's there for everyone should they need it, but you don't force them to use it. It's a bit like sentence starters. We have our 6-mark questions when they have to plan a method. A lot of the time students really struggle with how to get started. So I write some sentence starters on the board. If they want to use it, great. If they don't want to use it, they don't have to. Rather than, I know some people pre-print them with all sentence starters, you know, and that's, for me, that's not reducing the scaffolding because everyone therefore has to use it. So that's an example. So it's available if they need it, but they don't need to. And obviously you have to have a bit of, you know, your teacher accountability in there. If I was in a class and I was constantly seeing the same student getting the sheet out every time for the command words, I would make sure that they're my focus. So when we have it as a retrieval question, or we'll, you know, bugging the lesson outcome, or we do guided practice, which, you know, I'm sure all schools are doing with the I do, we do, you do, I model how I would book the question. When it comes to the we do, if I knew, you know, that Bob was really struggling, I would make sure, you know, not over the top so the other kids in the class would know, but I'm also checking in with them that they know it and giving them those little hints and reminders. So, you know, if we were doing the describe and explain, and I asked the students and they're really struggling, I was like, remember fat cat. It's those in the moment scaffolds rather than like that permanent scaffold that needs to be there.
No, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that because I always assume like scaffolding when we're talking about command words and having a sheet, it's like it's the sheet and that's it, and then the sheet disappears. But actually you're quite right, it's also the verbal prompts you're providing or the visuals on screen. And I think it's interesting that when we're touching here upon having high expectations, if you are just going to print the sheet, if you've got a group, I'm particularly at GCSE for psychology or sociology, whatever, or health and social, we've got groups of very, very mixed abilities. We don't have sets. And so actually, if we went ahead and just gave the sheet out every time or gave out sentence starters every time, it then feels a little bit prescriptive. And I think we then don't have high expectations of our students because we know full well that some of our students are like, oh, all right, cool, I'm definitely going to use these. And they don't have to then really think deeply, cognitively, about what it is the questions ask them to do. And they just become overly reliant on what they've been provided with. So again, I think that's a really good point.
100%. I am all for mixed ability. Again, you know, one of the things, mixed ability, if you look at the meta-analysis research, like that's the best thing to improve the outcomes for all. So, you know, I love the idea of mixed ability, and I think there's so many amazing ways you can scaffold and stretch and challenge in that. And I think like the way you suggested is just one. I think especially talking about oracy at the minute, and you know, the emphasis on that, actually talk to the person next to you. What do they think describe means? And then give them 30 seconds. Okay, now you say what you think describe means. Okay, 30 seconds between you, sort of figure out what is your final answer. Write on a mini whiteboard. 3, 2, 1, show me. Something else that I really think is important, just to like go back to the research, I am a science teacher, is the EEF, and they've only just brought it out, haven't they? The update on like metacognition. When we're doing our guided practice and we are, you know, doing our thought process, okay, right, this is an explain question. Explain, okay? That means give reasons why. I'm like, this is what I do on the visualizer. That's what the random hand movements are. Okay, so it's a give reasons why. So that means I need to start my answers with because, and so. So because, and so is the strategy that we ask students to start their sentences with if it's an explain question. Now, I say that I know we're all teachers of literacy, and I, strongly believe that, and we shouldn't be starting questions with sentences with because, and so. But in science, they are allowed to bullet point, so they would get full marks for that. So that wouldn't limit them. And again, that is a very science-specific strategy. Going back to your earlier point, we wouldn't necessarily be able to use that across the curricula. But if we streamlined our command words, and how they were assessed, I think we could. And, like I said, if I was in charge of the curriculum and assessment before, maybe that is something that I would definitely make sure happened.
Interesting. So I'm just processing a lot of things. I'm so tired.
Yeah, I know. I do talk a lot, sorry.
I also had open evening last night until 7:30, so my brain's going like super slowly.
Oh no! So we had practice clinic today. So we just came back from a practice clinic. So we did some deliberate practice on success criteria, which is amazing, and actually it links into this. So when we do our success criteria, like the first thing I have is how many marks is the question worth. If it's worth more than 3 marks, we bug it, and if we bug it, when we box the command word, we annotate it with what it means. And it's little things like that. It's how everything links in. Like, command words should not be different. It shouldn't be an add-on to the lesson. Like, genuinely, it's part of our retrieval questions. Every lesson has a lesson outcome. We bug the lesson outcome. Then, depending on obviously how they are, we might cold call about it. We might ask them for mini whiteboards. We might ask them to have that obviously discussion, where they have to turn and talk to each other. Like, one of like my bugbears, and I understand like this is why classrooms are designed like this, and I am glad classrooms are designed like this, but you want kids to talk to each other, and they're all sat facing the front. So like literally get them to face each other and have that discussion. What does explain mean? What does evaluate mean? And again, that guided practice, I model to them my thought process, then we model it together through the we do, and then their independent practice, I go around, I make sure that they bug their questions. And like I say, we're in November now already, and I've got a lot of students in year 9 and year 10 and 11 who are new to me this year. And you go and look at their booklets. We use booklets in science. They're all bugged because they know that is what's coming, and it's almost ingrained now. I'll be honest, we spent a lot of time on describe and explain, just because it's the start of the year. We are getting into our compares and our evaluates and our planner method, and my year 11s are very excited about their planner methods at the minute because I'm making them do lots of 6 markers on that. But it goes back to that success criteria. The first thing, do you know what the question is asking in terms of, not discipline specific knowledge, but what is the question actually asking you to do? Are you, evaluating, comparing, justifying?
Interesting, actually, because whenever I teach, our lessons are kind of structured, like I said, in line with assessment objectives. So our AO1 is the bog standard, knowledge and understanding description stuff. Your AO2 for us in psych is application to like STEM scenarios, so particular situations, like explain why Johnny's more likely to pick up that container when someone's wearing a uniform or that kind of thing. And then we've got AO3 evaluate, which is like usually the strengths and weaknesses of a particular theory or a particular method. And it's honestly, I love this conversation because it's never crossed my mind to stagger the introduction of those styles of question, because our lessons are always designed that way. Like, here's the AO1, here's the application, the AO2, and therefore here's the strengths and weaknesses, the evaluation, AO3. So therefore, throughout the lesson, I'll be interspersing those relevant questions that link to those AOs. But it's interesting because you've mentioned how you do your describe and explain questions first, and then you stagger in your curriculum to then introduce evaluate later. Is that what you've... Oh, I think we lost Joanne. Is she frozen? Potentially. We'll see if she's going to return. Joanne, can you hear us? No. Okay. Right. Well, I think if Joanne doesn't return, what we might have to do is reschedule. Oh, Joanne.
I am back. I am back.
I was just so close to
message. I was like, what happened? Oh no, sorry. So I am back.
Has the partner come home? He's now playing COD.
Honestly, I've just texted him. I was like, are you on the Wi-Fi? You better not be. No, he's not. Blessing me. He's a good egg.
Get off now.
Get off now. No. What were you saying? Sorry.
Sorry, saying how in my subjects we haven't necessarily thought about it to be honest, with enough depth about how we're introducing and when we're introducing those styles of question and linking to those different command words. Are you saying that you do your describe and explain first, and then bring in your tougher, more challenging command words and questions later?
In terms of teaching it as a skill, yes. What you need to be careful when you do that is obviously the content that comes at the beginning of a topic. So I'm just thinking, like, one of the first practicals they do in science for biology is to use a microscope. So they are sometimes asked to compare between a light and an electron microscope, and that is quite an easier one to do. It's easier to compare than to evaluate a microscope. So we always teach them how to compare it. But when we come back to revising later and then we're setting them, independent work to do ahead of an assessment, then we need to make sure that they're also doing the evaluate and they plan for those. Because if the other way around, the last practical that they do, which is an ecology practical, they would all be able to plan one of those because that's one of the harder command words, but they wouldn't be able to plan the first lot of required practicals they have. So in terms of as we teach it, that is something that we are conscious of, but we make sure that actually when they're doing their exam practice, at the end of year 11, when they're revising or when we're giving them their homework, that they are using a mixture of these command words. By the end of, by the start of year 11, they would have come across every command word. But in year 10, it is something that we are very conscious of, especially, students that are LPA or SEND. And again, it's that cognitive overload. I'm really, really fortunate. I have a lovely set 4 class that, oh my God, like they're my favourite to teach. They're in year 10 now. I taught them in year 8 and I was like, I love them. Can I please teach them in year 9? And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, can I have them in year 10? And I was like, we don't do this, Joanne. You don't get to pick what class you have. I was like, but I really, really want these. So I've had them for 3 years now. But also because I've had them for 3 years, they know it. They know what describing, explain, compare, evaluate. So actually having them this year has made it really great, actually, that I can go in with those. And it goes back to my earlier point about teacher lottery. And it's making sure that, all of the staff in your department are teaching the command words in the same way. So if, you have an assessment and students move class, halfway through the year, you haven't got to stop and then catch this child up. They all know, because you're all teaching the same subject. So the command word means the same thing. That strategy means the same thing. So it's making sure that all staff in your department are doing it at the same time and they're doing the same command words. Because as you can imagine, Mr. Windows, big up Mr. Windows again, if he was teaching all of his biology class only evaluate, and then I was teaching them describe and explain and they come in, there's going to be that gap in knowledge and we can't afford to have that. Like we say, we are so pressed for time, aren't we? Especially in optional subjects.
Yeah, thank you for that appreciation. We do have a bit less time, yeah. Okay, so I want to kind of take the conversation. I know we're obviously pushing time. We've only got like 8 or 9 minutes, but there's something I did really want to ask.
I told you I can talk, Louise, honestly.
No, it's all good stuff, Crofts. So keep it coming. I'm learning a lot here, so I imagine viewers are as well. Maybe I'm more.
Well, I hope they are.
So obviously we want to talk about. We talked about this at the start of the show. Before we actually came on, you and I talking about peer and self-assessment and how you would use that in a command word situation, or how you introduce it. How does it help?
So with the peer and self-assessment, I think it's really important. Like for me, I know the importance of and the stress, and I'm sure we all feel this. You sat there and all of the students are putting their hand up like, Miss, I don't know what I'm doing. Miss, I don't know what I'm doing. Miss, is this right? Can you check my work? And, you've got the keen beans that want to check the work, which is great. But you've also got that student, who wasn't in last lesson and you want to make sure that they're caught up, and you've got a student who might have, they might have just had like a baby brother or sister who's born, and they're really excited and they want to talk about that. And you've got all of these different things that are going on in the classroom. So for me, peer and self-assessment is really, really important. So, but that goes back to the point that we were talking earlier about that success criteria. So if you have a really clear success criteria, and that first thing being, you know, what is the command word asking you? What is the strategy? What do you know about this subject? So say if it was evaluate the strategies for treating coronary heart disease, they would be telling me what evaluate means, what strategy they're going to use ahead. What do I know about coronary heart disease? What do I know about the treatments? And if you had it set up in a real, you know, bullet point structure that they go one through the other, when they're doing their peer assessments, they can tick off how far they get before they become stuck. And then, okay, right, they're stuck at this point. Talk to their buddy. What are they doing? And I think something that I'm really trying to get to happen in my classroom is them to have those conversations with each other first, and to promote that, you know, curiosity and those thinking skills, but also those listening skills about, can they troubleshoot between themselves before coming to the teacher, first of all. And then with the self-assessment and the peer assessments, obviously they have then got that purple sheet to refer back to. So it's almost like a bit like of a triage before they come to you as that teacher, because you know this yourself. Are you playing the LinkedIn puzzles? Someone's got me on the LinkedIn puzzles, and oh my days.
Hey, do you know, yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I always see you and I, like, you know, we're so close to their answers, and then sometimes I'm like, damn it, Crofts beat me by like 15 seconds. I'm there. Some days though, I get the top, and I'm like, Jesus, I'm on fire with Sudoku. Like, I don't know what's going on there.
I only get the top if I'm there at like 9 o'clock and do it before anyone else. There we go. That's how I feel.
You beat me from time to time, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. There are certain people, I sound silly, that I pitch myself against, and you're definitely one of them. I'm like, she's doing so well. Like, the standard I've got to reach.
No, I get that. Totally, I get that.
Sorry, Karen.
Anyway, I wouldn't be the standard you want to reach, honestly. But yeah, and now I'm going to sound like really bad, but do you know, like, I'm there sometimes, and I think is it the cross climber one, and I'm not getting the clues. I'm like, I don't know what this word is.
They have gotten harder recently. They have.
I'm like, well, I'm there, and I'm like saying to my partner, like, what's this? What's it? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, I need to know, because the time's going, and you want to beat everyone. You don't feel that same sense of accomplishment when I'm about to ask him to when I've done it myself. And the kids feel the same, don't they? When they work it out themselves by talking to each other rather than having to ask the teacher, and you see that in their face, Miss, I know this, or Miss, can you check ours? I look through the success criteria, I've got all the points. It also speeds it up for us. You know, if we're telling them exactly what they need to do to be successful. First thing, what's that command word mean? Second thing, what's the strategy? It saves you time. You're not going round repeating yourself saying, what's the command word? What's the strategy? Draw that table. It's a compare question. They've already done that by the time you get to them. And I do think, you know, as much as possible, we're really lucky as a school. I've got the yonder pouch. I don't know when I say yonder pouches, but we've got phone free pouches. I feel like I'm on the BBC, like, you know, not being able to say like,
there's no F and beeps here. We don't censor out. This is a live show.
I will be on my best behaviour. But yeah, so they're not you know, distracted with phones, but we know the effect that phones have had on teenagers and their communication skills. So as much as possible, we are trying to get them to talk to each other and you know troubleshoot, and making them more resilient. And you know, that metacognition skills, you know, that I keep talking about, the EEF has just come out with it again, getting them to plan and evaluate their own learning. Okay, have I decoded the command word? Have I used the right strategy? Rather than us just telling them. I feel like I've sort of gave my game away though with why I get so high on the LinkedIn. Sometimes it's because I get someone else to do it for me.
No, but do you ever wonder, sometimes I look at the scores and I'm like, yeah, but did they get there because they use too many hints, or do they actually genuinely do it themselves? Because that is a genuine question I have.
Do you know the ones where you have to get the numbers in order and people are getting it in 9 seconds? I'm like, what? I'm sorry, it takes me 9 seconds to work out where number 2 is.
Some people on there, I guarantee, are Shift E. They are using way too many hints. And on that cross climb shizzle, they're probably doing the reveal line. And I'm like, at a push, I'm doing reveal one word. And even then I'm upset at myself. I'm like, I've had to cheat.
I literally just ask people, I'm like, what? And it's the same like with the crosswords. If I ever do a crossword, I'm like, do two, and then I'm asking everyone else, and you just don't feel the same, do you? Like, it's not
No, you don't.
a yes moment in the same way. Sorry, we've proper gone off topic there. Sorry, guys.
No, I think it's great. I think everyone's here for our LinkedIn puzzle chat. I mean, who wouldn't be?
I'm literally like, people are going to be like, I beat you like tomorrow, aren't they? They're going to like message. I haven't done them yet today, but they'll be like, haha, like I got higher than you.
Do you know what,
we're going to get trolled.
On a random, the pinpoint one has gotten really difficult. Like, I pride myself on, like, you know, literacy stuff. The pinpoint ones have been mean recently. I think you and I both got like the coat situation. It was like lab coat, wasn't it? Or
yeah,
like
I feel like I'm a bit.
trench
I feel
coat.
like I am biased with that one being a science teacher, but yeah, there's a couple recently. It's took me on 5, and I'm like, what?
Yeah. I don't know why I signed up for the leaderboard.
When it ended in a double vowel, I was like, I don't think. I'm quite new to them. I've only been doing them like the last month. I was like, I thought they were like a link in terms of like the categories all linked together, not that they were ending in a double vowel. Like, I feel like that's not a link. Obviously, it is a link, but
some of them are quite obscure
though.
No, but I think it was a mistake me signing up for the leaderboard, because I'm like, oh no, competitive Lou is coming out and no one likes that person.
It makes it better.
I know. Yeah, but they did say today, they were like, oh, your brain's getting better. I'm like, is it? Is it though? What, from some LinkedIn puzzles? Is it?
You know, I love the Sudoku. Like, that's my favourite. But sometimes, like, getting 45 seconds, sometimes it's 5 minutes. And I just, it's when you do it in the day, I think. Like, if you do it early in the morning, it wakes you up. If you do it late at night and you're tired and you're just doing it so you get your streak, it's never good.
Yeah, but I kind of wish they wouldn't do it. I mean, LinkedIn platform, anyone who's listening, can you please design like a normal size Sudoku? Because doing a mini Sudoku is a little bit boring. Like, you can literally nail that and like at a push when you've got a really tough one, well, like 2 minutes. Yeah. Because it hasn't got as many cells. Like, if you go for a full-on Sudoku, it's actually quite like, you're like, oh, they're working. Mind you, that's when you kind of like have to cross out.
Queens is the one for me. I can sometimes do it like that. Sometimes I just can't do it.
What's this? Sorry?
Queens.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? I love that.
No, for me, like, my brain works. Like, if I get told to do something, I have to do it in that order. So I have to eliminate them. And some people do trial and error. And I'm like, no, I can't do trial and error, because that's not what the instructions say. The instructions say to use process of elimination. So, and then I get really distracted. And sorry, again, I've gone completely off topic.
No, it's all right. No, I feel I've gone on that tangent with you. I've taken you down that road. So sorry. Anyway, so before we kind of sign the show off, because I know obviously we've been going for the hour, and listeners are probably thinking I want my dinner. This is difficult for this show, because this one was kind of more strategies based. If there was one thing you could say to take away from this show, A, come and get your resource so we can adapt it on LinkedIn and X. That's a really key point. Is there anything else that you say either definitely do or think about, or definitely don't do, and kind of that's a myth, don't do it?
The one thing I'd say not to do, and it is a bit of a myth, don't assume that they know the command words. Don't assume that they'd have learnt that. Like we said, you know, any listeners that have just quickly, you know, tuned in for the second half, we looked at how different evaluate means in science, maths and English, and they're just the 3 core subjects. I'd say they are core subjects, but it annoys me, you know. I'm a science teacher, and it annoys me, like, so I can only imagine like social sciences, you know, performing arts and music, you know, when you're hearing like all core subjects. But when you think about that student who's took those 9 options and they have 288 command words, sometimes evaluate means the same in the 2 subjects, sometimes it means something else. We can't assume that they know it. So that is my massive don't. My massive do is to start early. So do not leave it to year 10 and 11 if you can to start teaching them. And it's the same for year 12 and 13. This is not a key stage 3, key stage 4 skill. And if there are any primary school listeners out there, it's definitely not, you know, a high school only skill. You know, it's frustrating for us as the teachers. I can only imagine how frustrating it is for the kids when it's the same scenario as earlier, but when we are like, you've left that question blank and you read the question again, or you reword the question rather than saying explain, give reasons why, and they can tell you. So if we're finding it frustrating, imagine how the kids are finding it frustrating. And ultimately, it's the best thing we can do for our lower ability, mid ability, and our SEN students. So, you know, if it's going to benefit them, it will also benefit the higher prior retainers. So why wouldn't you do it? I think it's too important. I think it's too important, if you've sat there and you've listened to this, to not go away and do something. And I know that probably sounds really big-headed.
No, you tell them, Crofts. You tell them.
You know, it is like +3 grades difference, honestly. And obviously, I'm more than happy to catch up with anyone, you know, on a Teams call. If anyone's really interested and want to geek out again about this, we definitely can. Or, you know, there is more on my blog, which is teachingsparks.wordpress, where it's got, you can download the if then sheet, but it also talks you through how I use it as retrieval, what we do in lesson outcomes, in terms of bugging the question. It goes into a bit more detail what bug means. I know I've explained it really quickly, but for those of you that don't know it, and I have got slides, you know, with loads of examples of when I've done it from Teacher Talk Science. To be fair, Teacher Talk Science was the first place I showed this to everyone, and I'll be honest, it took off from there. So sorry, I just want to say a massive thank you for Tom for letting me come. It was on my birthday. I don't know if he told you this. It was the 20th of April 2 years ago. I drove all the way up to Manchester. It was the day. So
I'm going off. He was singing. He was singing to you, wasn't he? He tried to get everyone to sing.
It was live. He was singing. I've got a Teacher Talk cup at school, which no one's allowed to use because it's my cup. That I was my birthday present. And it was, like I say, it was up in Manchester, and I was driving up there, and it was the day after Taylor Swift released the Tortured Poets department, and obviously there were so many songs on there, and I was having the best time of my life, just me in the car, Taylor Swift, geeking out about science, presenting. Met so many amazing people there that I'm still friends with today, and we still talk today on X. And then I came back, I got a mug, and I came back and listened to more Taylor Swift. It was literally like, sounds really geeky. It was one of probably my favorite birthdays maybe ever, and that really does sound geeky, but I genuinely mean that. Taylor Swift.
I was gonna say, I only tend to love Swiftie for her revenge songs. Like, I'm here for those. What was I gonna say to you? Isn't your James Plug research ed Warrington? Isn't that on your birthday next year? I feel like it is.
I don't know the date of that. Maybe it is. If it is, maybe we'll have to. But again, the work they're doing, you know, at that school, and the legacy, you know, policy at the co. Honestly, I love that. I keep seeing it, and it's like, we are building a legacy for these kids, and you know, I absolutely love that sort of like mantra. So you know, maybe it is. Maybe I'll be like, you know, go and geek out again on my birthday. Absolutely love it.
I'm taking you. We're going to that research ed, Crofts.
Oh, you and I are going. It's like sort of in between us, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, everyone. We're just having a private conversation about
we're just you know, discussing our next like catch up. But also, obviously, the Teacher Talk is coming up as well. I saw Tom obviously started promoting for that, isn't it? And the great thing about that now is it's not subject specific, which I think is amazing. Like, honestly, absolute. I love geeking out about science, obviously. But I just love like what we've done now, like getting strategies from different departments that you wouldn't necessarily always get the chance to in a busy school day. I think it's really powerful.
But yeah, are you coming? So that I wanted to give a plug to that. I haven't actually got. Have I got the date on me? Let me just get my phone for that Teachers Talk event. Because we had one recently.
I know. I was going to. Well, I was hoping that I saw myself really well tonight, and that Tom would be like, "Do you know what, Joanne? Definitely, we want you there." So,
we do want you. Like, I'm going to be there.
So I'm waiting for Tom to be like, "This is amazing." Yes. Or he's like, "No, talk too much."
Yeah, 14th of March. That one.
There you go.
And I'll be there geeking out on a stand, being like, "Hi everyone." So yeah, please. We're obviously looking for speakers and things, and we're definitely looking for people to kind of come share ideas. They are wonderful events, and our recent one for humanities was excellent.
Genuinely, so, it's what's got me all into this. It's the first thing, and I know we spoke about it before, and I've mentioned it a little bit, but so grateful for Tom for giving this platform, because it's little things like this that almost build. I say little things, like I think this is so scary. The fact that my video, like the fact I was like, are people going to see my face? I thought it was just audio, but like, you know, the podcast and getting just knowing that people actually want to hear your views and opinions.
Oh gosh,
there's 100 people. I was like, oh my days. I think it's really important to know that there are other people out there, and you know, you might be really fortunate. I'm really fortunate. My school has a real focus on teaching and learning. Like, people love it. I had a member of staff today come up, and she was telling us about all of the stuff she'd done on her MPQ course yesterday, and it was genuinely amazing. And there's a real buzz about it. But I am also really conscious not a lot of people have that in their schools, or they don't feel confident enough to go up maybe to the associate assistant principal and talk about that. So I feel, honestly, I just think you, Tom, and the rest of your hosts are doing an amazing job with these. I really do.
Well, thank you so much. Like, this is, and actually that's a really great plug. If we've got any listeners that have got a topic they're really passionate about, it can be anything education related, research related. It can be practical, it can be theory based. We want your voice, because we've particularly, I mean, Tom's vision essentially, and all the host vision is, we want teacher voice. It is important to kind of, we are the ones on the ground. We are the ones living the dream every day. So please,
rather than the people that were in the classroom 5 years ago, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
There isn't, genuinely, but you know, we're both in there all the time. Oh, hi Tom. Sorry, I just saw that you put a comment. I get too distracted. I shouldn't be doing this.
No,
it just said thanks, guys.
Oh, bless him. So yeah, please do get in touch with either Tom Rogers on LinkedIn or myself, Louise Marie on LinkedIn, if you want to come onto the show. We would love to have you. We're here for Teacher Voice. And in the meantime, thank you very much, Joanne, for joining us. I personally have learned a lot, and it's made me go away and think, I'm not doing as good a job as I thought I was, really.
I'm sure
particularly with my no, but there's always more to learn, isn't there? And that's the whole
that is
purpose
true.
of these shows.
You know, every teacher can improve. And, you know, and if you don't think that, then I don't know. I'm not going to say anything because we don't want to bleep it out. But every teacher, no matter how long you've been teaching, can get better, can't they? It's
definitely. Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Joanne. It's been wonderful. And thank you very much for tuning in, viewers, whether you're watching the show live or whether you're playing back. Thank you so much. And please do reach out to either Joanne or myself to discuss things further or talk about coming onto the show. So without further ado, have a lovely evening. Go and enjoy your evening meal if you're finally getting around to it. And I will see you in 2 weeks' time for another show. See you later.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.